Okay, this is the Senate Education Committee on the afternoon of February 20th. We're going to spend the first half hour of our meeting this afternoon taking a little bit of testimony on the community college of Vermont Accelerated Pathways and Careers, K-12 education. We had a bit of testimony early in the year, but now I think we're going to hear from people who've been involved in the program, which is great. We're starting with Rebecca Gopitz.
Coming in and that, sorry. Do you mind if I have Joyce Judy join you?
First,
We're going to do a quick introduction,
fine.
the two of us together,
Yes.
and then we'll introduce students. I just wanted to start off by sharing something that we have been gathering with talking to students around the state this year to ask them how they want adults to show up in conversations about career pathways. And because we're talking about career pathways today, I thought it might be relevant. It might push on some assumptions that you have, or maybe just reinforce what you do know already. So I'm Rebecca Copans with the McClure Foundation, and we are here today with students talking about the free degree promise. And I'll introduce Joyce Judy.
Thank you, and thank you so much for letting us come and talk about the flexible pathways bill. I'm not going to spend much time talking today for two reasons. One, I have laryngitis, but I feel totally fine. So, but what's more important is we have some students here today, and it's been very exciting. We've had like 30 students here, and you know, for many of them, some of them, this is the first time they've come to the State House, and many of them, this is the first time they've been able to testify and had the opportunity to really talk about something that they feel passionate about. So we're pretty excited to have them here. But before we introduce them and have them share their stories, just wanted to just briefly give you an overview of the early college program and the flexible pathways bill, because I think you guys hear so much, and you know, keeping it all straight, I can't imagine how much you get told every day. So just as a reminder, the flexible pathways bill was Act 77 was passed by the legislature in 2013. And really the goal of that program was to really help more young people finish high school, be prepared for their next step, whether it was college or going into the workforce, whatever, but making sure that we could keep students engaged in their learning so they graduate from high school. And this is even more important today because Vermont, you know, as liberal and as progressive as we think we are, we think we do a really good job, and we do. But Vermont has one of the lowest school graduation rates and the lowest college going rate of any state, of any state in particular. So this is even more important as we think about this. I also think that, and I shared this this morning with Senate Commerce and Economic Development, that I feel like Act 77 is one of the best economic development strategies Vermont has, because they're helping high school seniors be prepared for whatever's next. And I know you probably know this better than me, that every employer we talk to these days, they don't have enough employees. And if they can find people to apply for jobs, it's a mismatch between what skills they have and what they're looking for. And so really helping people stay involved in learning and get the skills that they need. And you know, and I'm a believer that not every kid needs to go to college, but they need to commit to continuing their learning beyond high school. And so Act 77 really is about creating a lot of different opportunities for students. So for many students, the traditional high school pathway works for them, and that's great. And we need to continue to support that. But there's a pretty big swath of students from home that doesn't work for them. And so I think that was the sort of background for creating Act 77. And so whether students go to a CTE program, they do a work-based learning program, they do an internship, they do dual enrollment, they do early college. It really is designed to build on their passion and make sure they stay engaged. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about early college. And what is gratifying to me, and the thing that has kept me at CCD for a long time, is I often find we are the open end of the funnel. And for so many students who we serve, if we weren't here, they wouldn't ever have the opportunity to continue their education, and they wouldn't think it was possible. And early college is one of those areas where you're going to hear today, and we have 240 students enrolled in early college this year. A high percentage of them are low income, and a high percentage of them are first generation. And they will tell you over and over, if they didn't have this opportunity, they wouldn't have thought about continuing their education. So it does plant some seeds, and I'm so grateful to the legislature for creating that program and continuing it in ways that are really important. You are here today, and I just want to make sure that people understand, because we use early college, and then we talk about pre-degree. Sometimes people are like, what is it? So early college is part of Act 77, and it is funded by the legislature, and it's designed it's part of the flexible pathways to help students get their high school diploma. So early college, the students who are enrolled in early college do all their academic work at CCD. They can do all their extracurricular and stuff back at their home high school, but they take all their coursework at CCD. So that's early college. Thanks to the McClure Foundation, 5 years ago said to the state of Vermont and Vermonters, look, if you do this and you do early college at CCD, we will fund the second year of your associate degree through pre-degree promise, meaning that students can earn an associate degree at CCD at no cost to them or their families. So you combine early college state program with McClure Foundation funding to do early college, and they can get their associate degree. And then, we have 26 pathways to UVM. They can transfer as a junior. We have many more than that at Vermont State University, to Champlain, St. Mike's. So students, they can either stop after that, go into the course, stop after that, and transfer. There's a lot of opportunity. But what it does do is it helps students and their families be able to afford a college education. But I wanted to be clear about we're talking about two programs, and sometimes people are like, I don't understand the difference. But the free degree is for the second year of their associate degree. So you're going to hear today from some students. Some are in early college, some have already been early college and are doing a free degree promise. It's best. So with that, I'm going to stop and let.
So actually,
Yep.
we didn't do it.
Oh, okay.
And for the record.
Yep.
You are
Thank you.
each.
I'm sorry, I should.
That's okay.
I should know that.
That's-
I'm Trace Judy, and I'm service president of the Community College of Vermont.
And Rebecca Covance with the McClure Foundation.
Okay, then we'll go around the table.
Not a shame from Wyndham County.
Seth Borgert, Service Presumptive Bennington Center District.
Terry Williams, Baldwin District.
Steve Heffernan, Addison County District.
Great. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca,
Yes.
and she will be introducing students.
Can I invite a couple students up to speak with you?
Sure, you can do whatever you want.
Ruby, you want to start? We'll
Sure.
just go right down the line. So just introduce yourself for the record and say what town you're from and tell us why you chose early college.
My name is Ruby Hall, and I'm from Burlington. And I chose to do early college because for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons was that I was kind of felt like I had gotten everything I could get out of high school. I had done pretty much all of my credits that I needed going into my senior year. I only needed one more credit to graduate. So I was considering just graduating early, but then I didn't really know what I was going to do after that. So early college was presented to me as an option, and I thought it would be a really good choice because it would, let me be more productive with my education than the time I had, and also the cost portion that was a big motivation because I've been really trying to find a way to go to college for without taking out big loans. My parents both were still paying off their college loans. My dad's did just get forgiven, but my mom was 46 and still paying. So trying to avoid that as much as possible has been a big goal for me. And CCB is a really great option to explore my interests because I think if I had really known what I wanted to do, in terms of a career or a path of study, I could have, gone to a college, like a 4-year, we sort of like figured it out, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do, so it felt like just like really big, like risk or commitment to like get into debt to like not even knowing if I was going to like it. And so CCV has been great so that I can, find out sort of what my interests are, take different classes, just without that big financial risk.
So are you in your senior year of high school right now?
No, I'm in my second year at CCV. So
Okay.
last year I did the early college program where it was my senior year combined with.
And that, your first year was paid for through the state
Through early college.
Yeah.
college, and your second year,
Through the McClure Foundations for your promise. Can you just tell a little bit about what your pathway is? Like what are you studying and what do you think you're going to do with it?
I'm in the STEM studies program right now. I'm set to graduate this spring, with my associate's degree. And I chose that because I'm like interested in science and I wanted to just kind of explore, like originally I thought I might want to do like computer science, but then I like some classes and thought maybe not. And, now I'm really interested in environmental science and, I'm interested in pursuing that. And I'm hoping either to spend some time perhaps studying in Europe after or go to UVM depending on how things work out.
that's very helpful. That's really, it's very interesting. Yes.
And do you have a pathway that you saw the STEM cells? So, you're going overseas, you'd find a college there to try to pursue the.
Yeah. I'm interested in some programs at schools in the Netherlands for like there's one I'm really interested in that's like spatial design and city planning, and there's another that's like land and water management that I'd be interested in. But yeah, if that doesn't work out, I'd probably study something similar at UVM. It'd be very easy to kind of transfer over because I did early college and 3 degree.
Great.
And that's something that really resonates with a lot of students. It's the ease of the transfer
Yeah.
pathway from CCV
Yeah.
to UVM or VTSU, or a lot of the private schools as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, real life example. Good. Yeah, okay.
All right, Annika. Thanks, Routine. Do you want to introduce yourself for the record and say what town you're from and why you chose Sterling?
Yeah. So my name's Annika. I'm from Colchester, and I am currently a student at St. Michael's College. I entered my second semester of my junior year, so I have one more year left, and I am only 19 thanks to the McClure Degree Foundation at Early College. I chose early college, like Ruby, for a number of reasons. So I have always known that I wanted to do college. My parents went to college, my siblings went to college, my extended family went to college, everybody around me went to college. Well, I didn't know what in the world I wanted to do. I was really nervous about jumping from high school to college because I did really, really well in high school. And by the time I was at the end of my junior year, well, curriculums were changing because the other people that were in my class weren't doing so well. And so instead of challenging those students, they did the opposite of students who were not being challenged enough. So I felt like I was going backwards in my education, which wasn't really fair to me. I participated in a number of mandatory meetings that we had to do to learn about what comes after high school, what opportunities are there after high school. So I heard about early college only once or twice and immediately knew that was what I needed to do. It was an opportunity for me to be challenged while still in high school, but it was also that stepping stone from high school to college, because while I wasn't being challenged in high school, I also knew that, well, excuse my language, that college was going to kick my butt. So I needed that little stepping stone, and I was really curious to know, even before my junior year, like, is there something in between? And so I learned about early college and knew that was exactly what I wanted to do. And on the other side of things, the financial part of it, which is also extremely important, not only for myself, but for other Vermont students. My family, both sides of my family they haven't always been in a great financial position. They started working when they were extremely young. So in turn, I did the same thing and I don't regret it at all. But I through that have learned and gained this strong sense of needing to be independent and of wanting to be that child who can and wants to support their family and to support themselves. While my parents have always done so much for me, I knew that this was an opportunity where I could go to school and they didn't have to reap the financial burden of it. So through the Early College Foundation, through the Early College and the Free Degree Promise, I was able to get an entire degree for free. My parents didn't have to do that. And then thanks to CCV, with my academic standing, I was also able to receive a number of scholarships from St. Mike's. So now I'm going to St. Mike's for a fraction, more than a fraction of what I would have had to do without this program.
So did you start in your junior year?
So at the end of my junior year was when I applied to early college. So then my senior year, I was at CCV.
Can you tell us, so something that Annika has said that really just sticks with me, she has a shocking number of jobs, but one of her jobs is working at Bagel Cafe, or was. And do you remember what, when you were talking to a customer about the early college program, what one of your coworkers said or thought about, like,
Oh,
how did that
yeah.
change how they thought about it?
Yeah, so it was just one day. I mean, I was working at that bagel shop for 5 years. So the owner, he became super close friends with me. His daughter is my absolute best friend now. And just, he watched me essentially grow up because I started when I was a sophomore or a freshman, I don't know. And so I think he was in conversation with me and I was in conversation with a customer who was just asking what I was up to for school and what I was doing after the bagel. And I was talking about early college and they had never heard about it before. And our baker has 2 kids. I want to say they're maybe 3 or 4 years younger than I am. And he heard me talk about this early college program. And he was like, what the heck is that? So I walked him through the whole process. And he, so long as the early college and the Free Degree Promise is still up and running and in good standing and able to give these financial opportunities to students, that he's going to have his kids go down that pathway. I also have a student, a peer at my barn where I ride, who's actually in early college right now. So I've been able to share my story at the barn, at work, St. Mike's now, and getting these people, these parents, to realize that their kids can go to college.
Like opens those up,
Yeah.
those doors to opportunities people don't quite know about or don't know that exist. So thank you, Annika. All right, Brennan. All right, last but not least.
So I'll just say over here that Dan Smith pulled me aside as I was walking through the stands.
Oh, good.
This program is really good.
I feel like it is one of the bright spots in our education system, and it's too well kept secret.
Yeah.
And it's something
Great.
that we really wish more people.
Those are 2 great stories so far. So
I would agree, definitely about the well-kept secret. I guess I can.
Introduce yourself for the record.
Yeah, I'm going to. I'm Brendan Swin. I'm from Middlesex in Washington County, and I am currently an early college student. I'm also a senior at U32 Middle and High School. I think actually it's important to talk about that fact that this early college and the Free Degree Promise is sort of a well-kept secret. And personally, in my experience, I heard a decent bit about early college, but not about what CCV is doing, not about the Free Degree Promise. I'd say a good chunk of the graduating class at U32 goes to Norwich for early college and has for a while. So, there's a good amount of people who are utilizing it there. But I personally feel like this option to take part in the Free Degree Promise is more invaluable to me than simply being at the college where all my friends are right now. Currently, what I'm doing is I'm on track to get an associate's in business, and that's going to be, I think, invaluable to me for a couple of reasons. The primary one is that in and of itself, whether or not I flesh it out into a full-on bachelor's, I can use that degree as effectively job security or a fail-safe. A business degree, will get your foot in the door of a lot of different fields, a lot of different jobs, and I think that that's really important for me now. Considering how the job market is getting gradually more volatile, and you really just need kind of something in your back pocket in order to get a job when you need to, especially in the state where opportunities are more limited, especially in sort of like more, even say more conventional degrees, but you know, more specific degrees that might be more in line with people's passions. I was always told with regards to what I was to do after high school, to follow, you know, to follow my heart, to do what I wanted and get a degree that aligned with my interests. And that kind of brings me to my other point, which is I feel more confident that I can do that once I'm able to get my associates. I might flesh that out into a bachelor's, my double major, but I'm confident now that I can at least think about getting a degree that might be what I'm interested in. And previously, I would have been having to make the choice between my freedom to explore my interests and effectively getting a steady job and a good like quality of life. And I think that's especially important considering, like I said, I want to stay in the state, but I feel like that's going to be tough. And ultimately, that's something that I think I need to sort of prepare for.
But I think all three of you, the thing that I'll say, I probably hadn't totally put my finger on just the notion of the glide path. I knew it was an efficient way, and I knew it was save money, and it's a lot of great things for kids. But that part about it's actually stuff. It's kids are doing this might not otherwise have gone to college. It's just such an easy way to ease in that it actually makes it much more likely. So that's I hadn't really think on that in any event. So thank you for that. That's something.
Yeah. So early college students are choosing early college for a number of different reasons. You know, they may have outgrown their academics in high school, like Annika. They may have all of the credits or most of the credits they need to graduate, like Ruby. They may just be ready to take the next step and really dig into what they know exactly what they want to do and they just want to get into it. Or they may just they may have had a social, you know, outgrown their high school socially. There were about 30 students here. I bet every single one of them had a different reason and a different story about why they're choosing early college. And the thing that really resonates with me is the way that CCB has completely embraced this program through the Free Degree Promise. They have created a really robust aligned advising program that has now benefited all of their students despite whatever program they're in. There's also a really solid career advising. So this advisors say, how are you today? And how do I get you to what your goals are and how to in the most straight trajectory, whether they want to go straight into a job right after their associate's degree, or if they want to transfer like Annika to St. Mike's or Ruby to who knows where they'll go. But it also creates, there's also a stipend through the Free Degree Promise to help students buy books and pay for transportation. It's a really intentional, purposeful pathway to get students from here into the jobs that we most need them in our critical occupations for the month.
Yes.
How many are enrolled statewide?
At CCD, there's 250 students.
Statewide?
Yes, and so if you think about the senior class, it's about 5% of the senior class of the seniors. The other thing that I will say is that we've looked at the distribution of schools in terms of we have schools that are small, schools that are large, send students. But the average school sends, if you take out all the zeros, there are some schools that no one comes, or varies from year to year, but it's less than 5 students per school that attend. So it's not like a huge drain because early college isn't for everybody. But for so many students, it does offer that. So many students and families, it offers an amazing opportunity. I'll share one story that gives you an example of why, just a huge difference of why a student chose early college. He shared with me, his parents got divorced. He had to go live with his mom. He had grown up in a school in the Northeast Kingdom, and his mom had moved to Chittenden County. And he was very mature he knew he needed to go live with his mother. But he said, if you think I was starting my senior year at a new high school, particularly a big high school from where I came from, he said I would have dropped, it wasn't a possibility. So someone had shared with him, he should try early college. And that made just such a difference. So I share that only because you never know what is behind the clothing that of how someone presents. So people opt for it for many, many different reasons.
So is, kind of touched on this with some schools, no certificates. Is the program actually available to every high school in Vermont?
Yes.
There's two parts to that question.
Yeah.
One is technically available, the
Yeah.
other is practically available.
Yeah.
Is it practically available everywhere?
It is, when you say practice, so we have 12 locations throughout the state. So very strategically located. So if anybody wants to take an in-person classes, we offered 600 classes virtually every semester. And, we started online education in 1996 and it was all about access because so many of our students, it's winter, it's Pearl and all that. And so long before COVID, 40% of our classes were available virtually. And we have a lot of different flavors of virtual. So students can do, the traditional online but we have a really popular is synchronous online, where they're sitting in like here and they're meeting, they're on Zoom, but they're meeting with a faculty member. And it's very much of almost a classroom, except you're not physically there. So students, and we look at that a lot in terms of early college students. What kind of classes, what modality do they access? And usually it's a combination. I think I saw a statistic, 80% of our early college students take at least one in-person class a semester. And so they mix it. They're very much like our more traditional students in terms of, I bet all these folks are working. And so how do they manage going to school and working and all their other responsibilities? And so oftentimes it's a mix. So we're different than a lot of schools in that, there are a lot of schools that have an online program and an on-ground program, and you opt for one. Ours is about modality. You want to take internal psychology, you could take it in Montpelier on Tuesdays, you could take it in Winooski on Thursdays, or you could take it virtually. And then there's different ways you could take it virtually. So it's available.
We have to move on in
Yeah.
a couple minutes.
I just want to
Have anything you want?
one close and a plea. So the McClure Foundation supports the Free Degree Promise. Last year, it cost us less than $150,000 for a universal debt-free associate degree that is available to every Vermont high school student that goes through CCD in their early college program. Chair Marcotte, the House Commerce Committee, has introduced a bill that would sustain this program by creating a split 4 ways approach through the Higher Ed Trust Fund. Higher Ed Trust Fund was created in statute, it says it's for non-loan student aid, that's what this program does. Currently, the Higher Ed Trust Fund has 3 beneficiaries. One is FESAC, UVM, and the Vermont State Colleges. What Representative Marcotte's bill would do would take that to a 4-way approach. So instead of the Vermont State Colleges being named, it would be Vermont State University. Did I get that right? Vermont State University, I always get that. And the Community College of Vermont. So they're both named individually, and it could fund this program definitely.
So you've done it as a short-term.
The McClure Foundation raises big ideas and tries them out. We did that through the corrections education program. We partnered with CCD and floated the balloon, and then the federal government said, hey, that's a great program. And they stepped in and funded it. We've done the same thing with this. We have 2 more years. We've committed through the class of the current 10th grade class. And we're asking the state to say, if you believe in this program and you believe in the data that is really speaking volumes to who this is serving, then consider funding it through the Higher Ed Trust Fund.
That's a bill coming over.
It's a bill that's been introduced. It's gotten stuck in House Education. But if you have a moving vehicle that you want to slide it into, the link's already there.
All right, yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks for coming in.
Thank you for the time.
Oh, yeah, here.
Thank you so much. Safe driving. Hey, how are you? Good to see you. How you doing it? You're great.
Thanks a lot.
You too.
Look at that, they emptied out for you.
See. I guess special ed isn't all that interesting.
There's different groups. So,
Like some folks might be joining by Zoom instead of in person.
right,
Help us get others in person.
okay, because, yeah. It's unusual custodian.
Is that real snow behind you? No? Oh,
Not yet.
it's coming.
So we have more people on the agenda than the two of you, or has it turned out to be the two of you?
No, Aaron and Zoe and Kelly Murphy should all be there shortly, I hope.
Okay. Are they in another hearing over here?
I'll check my calendars. I thought that they had it free.
I think there's, what's the next one? Okay, here we go. We got.
Madam Secretary,
Are we speaking to the students?
should we stand?
How's recent meetings and just understand you had a great testimony with the students that were just in. Wonderful.
It's fine, by the way, if two of you want to get there together, have you look at it, it's fine.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna be at the chair. That'd be great. Okay.
Still live, so you're ready. Results for the record?
Hi, good afternoon. For the record, I'm Zoe Saunders, the Secretary of Education.
I'm Erin Davis, I'm the Chief Academic Officer.
Good afternoon, Kelly Murphy, Education Finance Director.
And Ted Gates, Senior Fiscal Analyst. Thank you.
And I'm Katie McCarthy. I am the Early Childhood Special Education Program Manager. I sit on the Special Education Division.
We're pleased to join you this afternoon. This is part 2 of our special education presentation. We had a really robust conversation last time and didn't get through the full slide deck. So we're delighted to come back. From our recollection, we ended right before we moved into the strategic plan for special education. So that's where we thought we would start our presentation. And then if you have questions about any other element of the first report, which really walks through more of the data and the current state, we'll have time then to dive into those details. Does that work for you?
Yes, maybe.
Okay.
Katie, you have to share the deck, maybe.
Yeah.
I need permission to share my screen.
You have permission now.
Okay, great, thank you.
And so great, thank you, Katie. So part of Act 73, the Agency of Education was asked to deliver 2 reports. The first report was to evaluate the current state of special education delivery We shared those findings with you the last time we were here on this topic. A second requirement was to develop a strategic plan for special education to enhance the delivery of services across the state of Vermont.
Katie, you're gonna need to, so Anna joined us last time, you may recall. She's now on maternity leave, and so Katie's stepping in. And so Katie, if you could move forward until the slide that says Special Education Strategic Plan Report. It's a big title slide, so you'll know it when you see it. How much ground we covered last?
Yes, we did. We actually got through a lot last time. Exactly. Thank you, Katie. Okay, excellent. So we'll go to the first slide. We use the data and the findings from that first report to inform our strategic direction and to clarify the areas that we needed to focus most. One of the first pieces that we looked at was ensuring that the Agency of Education was organized in a way to best deliver and support the field around special education. And so the input from our environmental scan and data analysis informed the changes that we made through our reorganization. Our reorganization was intentionally designed to elevate our focus on special education. And that resulted in a couple of elevations in terms of roles and responsibilities on the team, along with new positions to focus on special education. We have added the Chief Academic Officer position, so Dr. Erin Davis has joined our team. Additionally, we have added a Deputy Chief of Academics. We are in the recruitment phase for that role. That role, in addition to the Chief Academic Officer, both serve on my executive cabinet. We are recruiting for the Deputy Chief of Academics to oversee both the Curriculum and Instruction Division and the Special Education Division, because we want to have intentionality, ensuring that there is alignment across, so that as we're making decisions around curriculum and instruction and providing evidence-based strategies, that it's grounded in understanding of what our students with an IEP will also need, and ensuring that those resources are accessible for all students. Additionally, we elevated the role of the special education director, which is a state director, is now elevated to a division director and sits on my extended cabinet. Additionally, we recognized that we needed some more focus and support around special education finance. So we created a special education finance director position that sits within our finance team. And we established a new team, which is the grants division. And that's specifically to have more support around the IDEA grant management, which are the funds that we receive from the federal government to support students with IEPs. And all of these actions are designed to help us to differentiate our support to the field, improve the monitoring, and overall being more proactive with how we provide training and support to the field. The next slide, in terms of how we put together the strategic plan. This was designed in coordination with the Special Education Advisory Panel, along with the steering committee of practitioners that we formed to support us with this work. We wanted to make sure that the plan for special education was not a separate plan or a separate scope of work to what we're doing agency-wide with our strategic planning efforts. And so what we'll walk through today is how we intentionally embedded our focus on special education throughout the agency-wide plan. And so this plan will include, as part of the requirements of Act 73 and what we're delivering, is unambiguous measures of outcomes, a timeline for implementation, and also making sure that everything we put forward in this plan is informed by data and by the needs of our system. So as we walk through this process, I'm just going to share with you at a high level, there were really two groups that were formed to provide this input. One is the Special Education Advisory Panel. This is an overview of the times in which we engaged with that group to provide input with to us around the plan. The first phase of all this work was evaluating the data. Let's evaluate the current state of special education delivery, look at the findings, identify the areas that we need to focus most to inform our work. And then we established a separate committee, which is comprised mostly of practitioners across the state of Vermont.
I think your slide deck may not be in sync.
There we go.
Oh.
Since your slide operator is remote, maybe just give her the
Sorry.
signal.
Thank you, Katie. You're on, if you could go to the next one. Appreciate it. Yeah, this steering committee. So just to give you a visual, you can look at the level of detail, but we've spent a really concerted amount of time with both committees to help us understand the data, help us to understand also the realities of the ground. So for us at the agency, bringing together a group of practitioners and parents is really important to us so that we're grounding our analysis and our approach in ways that are really going to add value to the field and supporting our shared goals of improving educational opportunities. So if you'll go to the next slide, Katie, this is a framework for how we approach the development of the strategic plan. We started with an environmental scan. The data that we shared with you last time directly informed the work of this strategic plan. Step 2 was developing the framework. We rolled out the framework at our inaugural statewide planning retreat in November. And we shared how the focus of special education is infused across all of the elements of our plan. The next part is looking at implementation planning and progress monitoring. So I want to give some clarity as to what was included in the report and then what updates we can actually share with you now since that report was delivered. So the scope of the report on the next slide for the December report really centered on the environmental scan. In that report that we shared, we really looked deeper in terms of what do the findings mean in terms of work that we must do as an agency to move forward, and how of that helped to shape the direction of our strategic framework. The strategic framework is organized across those 5 pillars that we've shared before, and we'll walk through a little bit more detail around that. And we've identified key performance indicators for how we need to progress as a state to better deliver special education services for all students. And then after we submitted the December report, we quickly moved into the next phase of planning, which was focusing on implementation planning. We have, since submitting the report, we have launched or relaunched in this case, the steering committee that's focused on special education and differentiated support for all learners. And the work that we'll be doing over the next 6 months will help us to refine the plan so that we are developing measurable targets and that we're creating initiatives that are really going to be shaped and informed by what is most needed in the field at this time. We're already starting to do progress monitoring on some of the early efforts that we've rolled out to build in enhancements. And then the steering committee will be engaged with us, not only for the next 6 months, but our hope is they'll continue to do this throughout multiple years, because that's an important source to progress monitor how we're doing on a regular cadence. So with these strategic planning, we started, as you know, with our vision statement. We've articulated a desire for the state of Vermont to be the best education system in the country, and doing that in a way that's very much resonates with our values in Vermont. And we've been using a framework of giving all students both fruits and wings. And in the context of really unpacking this vision statement with our special education advisors, they talked about how roots and wings, right, these are not just values of Vermont. It's actually based on research, the importance of students having a strong sense of belonging in the classroom, and how critical that is for our students with an IEP to thrive. And really, when we're talking about roots, it's, sense of belonging, and with special education students particularly, it's a sense of belonging in the general education setting to ensure that they are getting the right level of support to access high quality tier 1 instruction. And then looking at wings is making sure that every student is able to reach their full potential. And so we do see in the data that we continue to have persistent performance gaps when we look at our students with IEPs compared to their peers. And we're working really diligently to ensure that our students both have the foundational sense of belonging and connection, and are building those academic skills and are able to further really refine their learning and take on challenging experiences. So in terms of the strategic pillars, I think we've shared these with you pretty consistently of how we've organized our work. We are setting goals and developing initiatives that are helping us to advance academic excellence, promote college and career readiness, promote safe and healthy schools, improve operational effectiveness, enhance special education and differentiated support for all students. So this is the framework, and it allows us to have an organizing principle to support and structure the work. But one of the things that's really important and that we're paying attention to is not to create more silos. And so our emphasis on special education feeds across all of these areas, and we're being really intentional about closing the gaps and making sure that we have a full and robust focus of what's in each of these specific domains. So within academic excellence, we have set goals to improve proficiency in English language arts, mathematics, science, and also improving access to a high quality teacher. As this relates to the goals for special education delivery, we are very focused on addressing the persistent achievement gaps, which I have noted, and improving the quality of tier 1 instruction. If you recall from our previous presentation, that was one of the main findings, is that we can't think about enhancing special education delivery and support without centering that in improvements of our overall general tier 1 instruction for all learners. And we're looking to track the,
Just to catch up with you.
yes,
So we don't speak tier 1 education. Could you just
Yes.
elaborate?
sure.
Sure. So tier 1 instruction is what we call our first time instruction. It's the grade level instruction for the content area. So it's what you probably imagine when there's a teacher and the entire class in front of the teacher, where they're presenting new information, new content, and new learning for the students for the first time. So tier 1 means that it's accessible. It's being presented to all learners without significant differentiation or interventions like smaller groups or additional supports. And tier 2 would involve some additional supports, and tier 3 would move even beyond that in terms of the level of support and intervention.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
And do you want to expand and talk about when the quality of tier 1 is not at the level we would expect? What happens in terms of additional supports?
Yeah, I know last time I talked to you all a little bit about the downstream effects of when upstream the tier 1 or first time instruction is not strong. So if students on the whole, the majority of students, including those with IEPs, are not mastering the content when it's being taught to them, their learning isn't reaching the level of proficiency when it's first being presented, then we see that there's an increased need in the number of additional supports and intervention and number of students who need to access those supports. And so I think last time I talked in generalities about some percentages, right? If students in kindergarten only master 80% of the 100% that they were supposed to learn that year, and then that happens again the next year and the next, the compounding effect, and systemically what needs to happen within the school then in terms of filling those learning gaps that students have becomes a real challenge. Again, that's true for all learners. It gets compounded even further for learners with IEPs and disabilities who may already need some additional supports and interventions.
Thank you.
Absolutely. In addition, in this area, we're focusing on tracking the state's decreased reliance on paraprofessionals. So within each of these areas, as we go into our steering committees, it's looking at how we can measure these indicators and also identify some of those early indicators that we would actually want to evaluate before we can get to the outcome data. It is important to note that what we found, in one of our big findings in our first report, was that we lack coherent monitoring tools now to fully evaluate the quality of tier 1 across the state of Vermont. And so that's why it's explicit in our plan that we must develop that approach. We're going to talk a little bit more about how we're developing that. And as we do, that we're really clear in establishing those measurable points that we can evaluate our progress. So what you'll really see as we go through, and I'm going to go quickly through, is what you're identifying in our goals are directly addressing what we have determined are gaps based on the report that we shared last time around the current state of special education delivery. So if you go into the next strategic pillar, which focuses on college and career readiness, overall as a state, we seek to improve graduation rates, improve middle school acceleration, I will note now that this particular point will need to have some further exploration as we identify the best way to track middle school acceleration, and will likely be an area where we will seek some updates and amendments to our ESSA state plan, so that that's part of our accountability framework. We are looking to increase the completion rates for industry certifications. That's so important for our students that are seeking to enter a high demand career after high school, that they've had the opportunity to earn those credentials so that they can be competitive in the marketplace. And also improving college persistence rates. So for our students that are entering post-secondary after high school, we note that a lot of them may not complete their college degree program. And we need to evaluate both some of the factors related to readiness, and there may be some other factors too around the financial life.
Track that. Because
So this is an area that we are going to have to review, so that we can have a better way of tracking persistent rates.
you're gonna tend to hear only from kids who are doing well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's noted, one of the things we have identified in our framework is that some of these goals that we have in here, we currently don't have a way to evaluate, but we think it is important, and that's going to be part of the work that we do over the next 6 months, is refining these goals and identifying the best ways in which we can actually track it.
Going back 2 steps,
Yes.
what would be a KPI for middle school acceleration? What's that really mean?
Yeah, so some states within their accountability framework, which is designed to measure school quality, there is a metric for middle school students taking advantage of courses that are advanced level courses in middle school, or courses where they can earn a certification that's appropriate at their grade level. And so there's a whole suite of programs which middle schoolers would be ready to take on and get a certification in, for example, like the Adobe product suite or other types of programs to really get them ready for a career. We currently don't have that within our accountability framework, but there are other state models that we can look at. And that will be further conversation where we'll need to have input around how we want to measure the success of middle school acceleration. And related to special education, we, as you know, have recommended statewide graduation requirements. That was, mandated through Act 73. That proposal is currently with the State Board of Education, and we have a committee that's been formed on ensuring accessibility to those graduation requirements for students with an IEP. That committee has already started their work and is really making some substantive progress. The next pillar is focused on promoting safe and healthy schools. In this area, we've set statewide goals to reduce chronic absenteeism, to reduce dropout rates, reduce school safety incidences, and improve facility planning. How this connects to special education delivery is really evaluating the relationship between the inclusive environments and graduation rates for students with IEPs, including tracking suspensions and expulsions and restraint and seclusion. So those are all some of the factors that we believe need to be monitored in a way to be more proactive in addressing and reducing dropout rate and chronic absenteeism. And also, as we move forward with facility planning, we need to, of course, consider the ADA compliance requirements for accessibility. Moving to the next pillar is focused on improving operational effectiveness. In this area, we've identified a number of internal measures of operational effectiveness, along with some measures of effectiveness related to achieving compliance across the various areas where we have federal and state compliance. So one of the explicit goals we've identified is to accelerate assessment reporting. The state of Vermont has historically released our annual snapshot and state report card much later than other states. In my work, I'm very used to seeing those reports released in August or latest in October. And so we, as you know, just released that information this month. So we are working on an entire process to re-engineer how we collect that data and report the data. It will involve some changes with data collection and data verification in the field, but it's important that we're able to get that information out earlier so it's timely and supportive of more immediate planning. It also has implications for access to funding earlier for those schools that would qualify for additional support. Additionally, we are working to improve grant utilization. So we recognize that some funds are left on the table, particularly as we look at federal dollars. And we want to make sure that we are maximizing all of those resources. That's part of the reason we've established our grants division. We're also working to increase professional development opportunities for agency staff. An example of that is we've done a lot of training around the science of reading for many of our team members so that they can support with the implementation of Act 139 and our efforts to promote literacy outcomes. We also are really looking to achieve compliance in all federal areas. The state of Vermont has had long-standing compliance issues with many of our federal programs. And so with every team that oversees any sort of federal funds, we're looking really closely at why we've been out of compliance and what actually needs to be rectified in order for the entire state to achieve those performance expectations. I often talk about how compliance is the floor, and I do mean that because we actually just need to be in compliance and then focus more on the work around improvement. But it is true that we're out of compliance in many areas. So that does create some operational difficulties because that comes with more onerous reporting, more onerous monitoring. And so we really need to get beyond that so we can focus more on the innovative work that we desire to do to drive improvement. And then improve customer service. This is an area as a agency that we've placed a lot of emphasis and is part of our values is how we work and infusing our strategic plan. And that includes improving being more embedded in the field in terms of training and more accessible. And so the goals as it relates specifically to special education in this area are achieving compliance related to the special education funding around IDEA. And also that means, because there are key areas, it's actually pretty comprehensive, the way in which we're evaluated by the Office of Special Education Programs. There are a number of indicators. And so we've looked at some of the key areas that we need to improve in order to be in compliance, and that involves increasing participation participation in the assessments, increasing proficiency rates for our students with IEPs, because we've noted that there's this persistent gap, decreasing dropout rates for students with IEPs, and there's a number of other indicators that are more procedural in terms of how we process and identify students with an IEP.
So I'm not sure if this is the right place to ask this question, but it seems to me that we've got like the students going from elementary school to middle school or from middle school to high school. The real issue is perhaps the improvement that happens, because if you get a kid starting in middle school, let's say, who's 2 years, they come from a school that's not doing well and they're all 2 years behind, and then the middle school gets blamed because they're not, students are where they're supposed to be. And do we actually measure the rate of progress starting from either beginning of middle school or the beginning of high school? And that's, intuitively, that seems to me to be a key measure.
Absolutely. So within our education quality standards, all schools are required to implement a local comprehensive assessment system, which will benchmark students 3 times a year to really evaluate their progress within that academic year. We have done alignment studies with the local comprehensive assessment systems that are most used in Vermont with our VT-CAP, and they show very tight alignment. So that helps as you're thinking about tracking the improvement of your students, but more importantly, these reports help you to identify where students have some skill deficiencies, and so that can be more targeted support. And we also like to frame it in a different way of saying, it also tells you what students are ready to learn next, right? Where are they and where are they ready to learn next in terms of meeting their goals? And most of these goals come with a traditional goal and a stretch goal that students can monitor and teachers can support. And then I would mention also beyond the requirement for evaluating progress, it's important to recognize that we need that early intervention, and that's what you're sharing and Dr. Davis has described, it can have a compounding impact if we're not addressing the skill gaps for our students, if they're not meeting those grade level standards. And so part of the work is also ensuring that there is a coordinated curriculum when you think about elementary all the way to high school, and that there's opportunities for planning across teachers and teachers across schools, even when you're really supporting that level of transition. I will note that another finding we have from the U.S. Department of Education is that we need to do a better job tracking those critical transition years. So tracking how students perform between 8th and 9th grade. We think about elementary to middle school, and it's really about ensuring a level of readiness that our students are prepared to progress to the next grade level. And so that's work that we're putting into place to make sure that there is that level of support.
Yeah, I do want to affirm the challenge that presents for teachers, right? If the early interventions have not been provided, we actually are having classes in later grades where the majority of the students are behind grade level. It becomes very difficult for the teacher to meet the needs of the student collective and provide that first time tier 1 instruction that is on grade level. And so, that's not entirely a new challenge, but when we look at our overall results as a state over the last decade or so, they have been declining, both according to the NAEP, the National Assessment, and to our statewide, the VTCAP results, right? Best practices for that is to both provide the first time on grade level tier 1 instruction and what we would call like a double dose. So a second time during the day where the students with those gaps are having access to additional learning in the content areas where they have those gaps. What we're seeing right now in a lot of places is that the resources that teachers have available to them are intervention curriculum, meaning that they're behind grade level. They're designed with the intention of filling gaps that students may have. And so if you are using an intervention curriculum in place of a tier 1 on grade level curriculum, those gaps will never close. It's just perpetuating the problem. So I know I keep harping on the upstream metaphor, but if we don't go upstream and address some of these systemic issues, and that comes down to things like scheduling. How do you ensure that there are opportunities in the schedule for double doses, that students aren't being pulled out of tier 1 first time instruction for the differentiated instruction? Things like instructional materials. How are we providing clearer expectations as an agency around which resources are for tier 1 versus which one are best used as intervention to combat some of the misconceptions in the field, and make sure that teachers have the resources that they need. Those are all things that we're leaning into as an agency because we're seeing those gaps, and it's the reality, and it's very challenging for teachers right now.
I thought Sherry Sousa was very compelling as a superintendent who saw herself as the instructional leader for her district, and how important it was that she have instructional leadership over that entire pipeline so that whatever they saw in high school, it wasn't lost on the elementary schools or the middle schools, what needed to be done. Would you say that's probably a best practice around the country, that if you shape a school district or supervisory union, you have an instructional leader who doesn't have a lot of other layers in between them and all levels of academics in the system, so that they're coming in relatively on the same page?
So what the research shows is the importance of instructional leadership in terms of outcomes for students, but that's true at all levels of the system. It's not actually been correlated to how many layers there are.
Okay.
So
I think what I meant is, like, if you have a school board in between you and your elementary school, and another school board in between a different middle school, and another school board in between a K-8 over here.
That is part of the challenge that we're seeing right now in Vermont, right? It's the coordination, particularly in our K-8 systems. Then the receiving high schools have indicated to us that they can actually, without looking at a student's record, guess which system they may have come from, and that, you know, speaks to the lack of coordination across the. Yeah, what I was speaking to more is, you know, our principals, especially in our smallest schools, wear a ton of hats. Right? They're supporting, you know, community involvement, partnering with families, they're supporting discipline in the classrooms. We know that rates of, you know, disciplinary challenges have been increasing. They're coordinating all of the operations of the building, and we also need them to be instructional leaders. And that goes for the superintendents as well. They wear so many hats, the curriculum directors. I mean, you know, folks are, I think one of the things that I've seen other places that I've worked when they are at a larger scale is that folks are able to be a little bit more differentiated, and the folks who can really hone in on the instructional leadership are in positions where that allows that to be their focus.
The last pillar is looking at special education differentials for all learners. As we've described, our emphasis around this is infused throughout the plan. I'll just call out some very specific goals around closing the achievement gap, meeting or exceeding federal compliance, and beginning to really measure the implementation of those best practices outlined in Act 173, all of what Erin is describing in terms of ensuring that we have that high quality tier 1 instruction, we have the coordinated curriculum, that there's a right level of support for intervention for the students that need that additional time. And also that involves scheduling. There are some operational and practical elements of that that we can provide some guidance. We'll talk a little bit about how we're supporting in that area. So I'll kind of run through, because I'm sure that we're getting to the point where you're eager to ask some questions so we can dive in. This is just a framework of really we're working towards alignment. So overall, we've established a statewide strategic plan. We've noted today how an emphasis of special education is infused across all of those pillars, along with being represented within our vision statement. And then there's work that happens to operationalize the strategic plan. So we don't want this to be something that we put a lot of time on and then we put it on the shelf, right? And so the success factor is really thinking about the implementation planning. So what we're doing with each of our divisions is identifying what their specific role is in terms of moving the needle around these goals and identifying how they will work with other divisions in order to have a coordinated approach from the agency. So that will help us as we get down to these other levels of providing the right level of support when we're doing improvement planning with our districts and with our schools. That goes all the way down to the student level, right? In terms of that alignment. So our special education divisions, yeah,
If I could, on that slide, what is a CIP?
a continuous improvement plan. So district develops a continuous improvement plan, and then the school, yes, the school develops a continuous improvement plan, and then that goes down to each individual student's personalized learning plan, right? So we want to make sure that as you're establishing key goals, so you know, we have a key goal as a state that we are going to improve literacy rates. So you're going to expect that there's going to be an emphasis on literacy in these continuous improvement plans at a district level, school level, and that those students that are struggling are also identifying goals for how they're going to improve their literacy. And so what we look at with the this cascading framework is to ensure that we have that tight alignment on those areas that are strategically important to the agency. And you often hear me talk about this framework of tight or loose, right? Like, and so the agency needs to be really tight on identifying what those priorities are and providing that level of support. And then we need to be loose on the areas where there's needs to be more customization and innovation, because there's other goals that districts and schools and students will have depending on their needs and their interests.
Do you think about using summers for,
Yes.
you know, you've said this, but I was talking to the principals in my district, and she was saying the same thing about 20%. She's by the time they're in 6th grade, they're done. They've checked out, they're done. Because they've fallen the equivalent of at least a year behind, 20%, you know, 5 times or whatever. And it seems to me that when, because you know, if that happens, that every year is the most important year. The first year, the second, third grade is more important. You know, that's where it's really important. Do you think about using summers for
Absolutely.
real catch up so that they're truly where their peers are by the time the next year starts? So what's happening?
Absolutely. So you're you're naming it, right? I mean, students will need more time to really master the standards, especially if they're operating multiple grade levels behind. We are in a really unique and wonderful position in the state of Vermont, which we have established universal after school. And part of that is ensuring that we have those extended learning opportunities, and that includes both during the school year and during the summer. And so on our team, we've been working very closely with the After School Advisory Board to talk about how we can really expand that portfolio of after school and summer programs to ensure that that time can be maximized to support students with tutoring and additional enrichment that will help them to catch up so that they are ready and prepared for the next grade level. Yeah, go ahead.
It's not just about time though. I can make a plug for there are instructional practices that help students with recovering learning loss. And so, for example, if you look at the progression of the math standards year over year, it's building on conceptual understandings early on. So kinder, understanding one-to-one correspondence. And when I touch one block and then the next, I don't go back and touch the same block again. Well, if we don't have that conceptual understanding, it becomes very difficult to actually do simple addition with abstract numbers as the representation of that, right? But if you notice that that's the gap that a student has, going back to the conceptual gaps that they have in their learning will let you accelerate closing the gaps that they have significantly. But that requires that teachers have done deep study of the progression of standards across the grade in order to diagnose that and intervene appropriately to close the gap quicker. So that's some of the work that we need to do as well, is make sure that teachers are equipped with that, are very familiar with the standards and the content areas that they're teaching. So yes, it's time, and there's ways to catch them up otherwise.
So within each division, they're identifying how they connect, to supporting that aspirational vision, what their role is in helping to advance these key performance indicators, and what are some of the things that they will be focusing on as a division to enhance. So within the special education division plan, they've reestablished strong cyclical monitoring. So to ensure that we have a level of rigor in providing support in evaluating all of our district and schools on a regular cadence, according to the indicators by which we are evaluated through by the federal government. Also, they're working to address gaps in service delivery. So as we noted in our initial report, we have a large number of our students that are in a fully inclusive environment, and we have an above average rate of students that are in a separate school. And so one of the things we're noticing as we look at our overall performance as a state, we've seen an overall decline. So if the majority of our students are in an inclusive setting, and that we're seeing overall our academic performance is declining, this is pointing to a need to have higher quality, the general instruction, but also recognizing that there's a missing gap there, that students might need some additional targeted interventions that are in between a fully separate school and an inclusive environment so that they can better access that general instruction. And what we've heard in talking with the field is there are a number of programs that districts are developing in-house to provide that more integrated continuum of support for all learners. And right now we don't have great visibility to that in terms of the data, because it's not something that we're required to collect. So as districts develop those programs, the agency doesn't have a role in overviewing or approving those programs. So we have limited insight, but what we're learning is it's really important for us to understand how those in-district supports are benefiting students. And just from the initial work that we've done in focus groups with districts, the scale of the district does contribute to their ability to pool resources and design these specialized programs of support. And part of the special education division's team's responsibility is to learn more, because we want to understand what's working well and how we can leverage those best practices to ensure that all students across the state of Vermont are getting that access to what we've been calling that missing middle support that is more integrated in the district. We also are seeking to improve accessibility and caregiver involvement. And this is a key area. We know that the parent is a strong partner in their student's education. And it can also be very overwhelming and intimidating as a parent to navigate the system and ensure that your student gets that individualized education plan that they need. And so that comes with making sure that there's clear guidance in plain language around, the parents' rights and the process support. Additionally, the division is focused on integrating and improving quality and agency coordination. So we've talked a lot about how our focus of the agency is to break down silos. Every organization has silos, right? And it requires great intention to ensure that you are overcoming those gaps. And so as they're developing their division strategic plan, they've outlined areas where there's interdependency with other divisions. Really strong connection with curriculum and instruction, and a lot of the work that Erin or Dr. Davis is describing in terms of ensuring that there's access to that high quality instructional material. There's a tremendous overlap with safe and healthy schools and all of the pillars that we've identified. So in the report, you'll see that there's some tighter descriptions around how the special education division is being intentional, working with other divisions to operationalize our plan. And then we have a number of major initiatives that are underway. And I'll let Dr. Davis expand on this. And I want to also commend her for bringing together the field to evaluate how can we best deliver this training in a way that's going to add value. So now that we've reviewed the gaps and we understand what additional training is needed, we're developing programs that are really focused on statewide training on evidence-based practices. But we want to make sure that we're not overwhelming the field with a bunch of disconnected opportunities. And so we'll outline for you how we're approaching this work. But over the next few months, there's going to be a lot of refinement in terms of ensuring that there's really that cohesion and that we're rolling out these opportunities statewide for training that are really adding value and are really contemplating the best way to impact results, given that there's a lot of limited time to participate in training and support. So, go ahead.
Good question for you. So you talk about NAEP scores.
Yes.
And we've been told in the testimony that NAEP scores don't really show the true story. But nationally, to compare nationally, I guess they do, right?
So I'm not sure what, where that is coming from in terms of what the assertion was that they're not valuable. So to clarify, the NAEP results they're valid results, and it is the only data point that we have to compare the state of Vermont's performance to other states. The assessment is done through a sophisticated sampling process to ensure that it's representative of the Vermont student population. And so it is really valuable data and gives us an understanding of where we are. Now, not every student gets a result because it's a sampling, right? It really is giving more of a statewide measure of our performance. And so that may have been where some of the critique was coming from the discussion you had previously. So that's why the VTCAP, which is our state assessment, is important because every student is able to get a result. And so you can identify where that student is performing and what some of their growth goals would be for the next year. We do see that our state results are largely consistent with national results, but they're used for different purposes. And then we know that not any one data point will tell the full story of a student's learning experience, but it definitely has to give a measure of quality, and it helps us to support data-driven school improvement planning. And when we engage in school improvement planning, we look at a number of other factors to understand what's actually contributing to the performance. That's where the real world work happens, is really diagnosing, okay, well, maybe we had above expected levels of performance. What went really well? What was the strategy that we want to learn from and replicate versus, wow, we really saw a decline, or we expected that we would have more growth in English language arts than we did. And then there's more questions around, well, what might have contributed to that? Was it about an adoption of a curriculum? Was there teacher turnover? Was there chronic absenteeism? What are some of the other factors? And then that continuous improvement plan that we mentioned is designed to set really clear goals, and the strategies to achieve those goals. To do it well, you need to contemplate the full set of factors that are contributing to that performance.
I noticed you're evaluating the whole scope of it, but
Yeah.
you see any one particular thing that could be contributing to the majority of the problems around, like, is it reading? I mean, I understand if you can't read, you can't do math, because you can't, logically read it and explain how to do the equation. Is that a basic?
So we can talk and expand a little bit about, what we see as the major areas of emphasis are ensuring that there is clarity around those grade level content standards. That's really important. And to ensuring that there's access to high quality instructional materials, along with training on evidence-based practices. And that's really where we're focusing our efforts with the initiatives that we're rolling out.
Well, that your point about literacy is well taken, that it's interdisciplinary. It's not just the English language arts teacher who should be teaching it. It shows up in every other content area as well. And that's been an important aspect of the Read Vermont initiative, is that it shouldn't just be literacy teachers who are engaging in that training. And we've been modeling that at the agency level. We had over 30 members of our staff who engaged in that science and reading training that the secretary mentioned earlier. And it included our extended learning opportunities team with after school and summer. It included our CTE folks. It included all of our different content areas. It included our special education division. It was very cross-sectional. Our licensing division as well. I mean, it really was a wonderful turnout, for that many folks to engage in it because of its important.
We have about 5 minutes left.
Sure. Some of the updates to the initiatives.
So one of our major findings around Act 173 is that what's in the law is the right content. It's that the implementation of it has not been consistent or successful yet. Act 173, of course, was from 2017. And so we were in some early stages of implementation as a state when it was interrupted with the pandemic. And so we do know that there's a need to relaunch the work of Act 173. We also know that some of the strategies that were in place previously could be improved upon. So, for example, it's not sufficient to have a playbook that spells out what needs to be implemented from Act 173 if you don't also have a framework for measuring the progress of the implementation. Folks need consistent toolkits for how they will know if specific look-fors or indicators of implementation of Act 173 are actually in place in their building. I briefly mentioned the scheduling earlier, right? That's a fairly straightforward look for of whether or not your students who need that additional intervention are being pulled out during that first time instruction or not, right? So there's some that are a little more check yes or check no. And there's others that are a little more complicated, like the teacher's level of familiarity with the progression of the standards from one grade to the next, right? So we're being very intentional in the design of the supports that we're preparing to roll out. Based on the results, we do feel that it needs to be a statewide initiative. So we're also being intentional about being able to offer it at scale. And yeah, we are coordinating it with other professional learning and supports that we know are necessary, such as our literacy initiative, being intentional about mapping which specific roles. I know she mentioned earlier the superintendent. Similarly, it talked about all the hats that principals are wearing. They can't engage in everything all at once and meaningfully implement all of it at the same time. It's just too much of a fire hose. So we're putting together a working group that's going to help inform who we have participate in which professional learning experiences when. And making sure that it's got input from the field and its design, that we can be intentional so that as many people can participate as possible to ensure that it's being implemented while this go out. Anything that I missed?
And that also connects with the Read Vermont initiative, right? So all of it is really thinking through as we're delivering this training and there's opportunities for the embedded coaching, which we know is so valuable, that we're really aligning these experiences in ways that are meaningful and not creating another thing or training that's disconnected from our efforts to support literacy, for example.
And we know that there's benefits to using a statewide and a cohort model, especially if we look ahead at some of the changes on the horizon around Act 73. If folks are going to need to consolidate, if they don't have experiences and haven't had the opportunity to engage in some shared learning together across SUs and SDs, it could make it more challenging. And so this could provide us with a meaningful opportunity for everyone to start building some of those relationships. And for the change that's coming, we know there's still some important decisions to be made, but it's feel a little less intimidating.
I do want to, it would be remiss not to call out that there's a resource question when we talk about statewide training. So historically, the agency's focused on smaller, more pilot programs or cohorts among a select group of supervisory districts. But what we're recognizing is the need for statewide training. And so we're leveraging the resources that we have now to start to model that. But it's just something we really need to think about, because statewide training is definitely more intensive. And that's forcing us to evaluate our budget, realign the way that we work so that we can deliver more statewide training. And there is a request in the governor's budget to revert some funds to support literacy. And that's the reason, is that we're really making that shift as an agency, recognizing a statewide approach. I would name that that's still a very small value compare how other states are investing in these type of implementations. But what we're really modeling is kind of squeezing every penny that we have to expand the level of training statewide to really deepen that. There are resource questions.
Good, a couple questions.
Yeah, that's a good question. So good briefing. Appreciate you guys coming in on the topic. Again, so special education is really a sensitive topic. Everyone's very passionate. And there are there are several constituent groups that have come to us and said, hey, look, we didn't feel represented, or we're not heard in the process of development of the strategic plan, or maybe implementation of Act 73, et cetera, et cetera. What would your advice be to those folks? Because I know they're listening. How can they get engaged? Who's the point of contact that they should start with in your team? Say, hey, got something to say. It's my observation.
So certainly there's opportunity to reach out to me or reach out to Dr. Davis, but I would note that we've actually had really strong engagement from our practitioners or special education practitioners across the state, along with parents and community members in this process. And that's reflected in the report, in both reports. We have lifted up the feedback that we have received from the Special Education Advisory Panel and the feedback that we've received from the steering committee to ensure that we're emphasizing those points that are really critical to address, and that we're designing our strategies in ways that are really helping to address those areas. And in fact, I think when we did release our report, many of the associations actually released an accompanying press release saying that they really valued the level of collaboration that the Agency of Education took with the field to evaluate the data and to inform the reporting. So I think that's very encouraging and showing that what we are reflecting back is representative of the data, but also around the meaning making that is supported by our practitioners, by parents that are involved. So right now, there's a number of ways to engage. Our Special Education Advisory Panel meets every month, and we provide an update on our strategic planning process. We also have invited participation on our steering committee. The steering committees have launched, and I always say with any committee, you start by saying who else needs to be around the table, right? So that we have a diversity of perspectives. And then there's just ongoing ways to reach out to the agency and to the division if you have questions.
Good, that's fine. Thank you.
Anything to add to that?
Yeah, thank you. That good briefing.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Appreciate the time.
Well, we take a 5-minute break. We're back at 10 o'clock, so there's 5 minutes left.
Thanks, Katie.